In Bolivia, President Luis Arce urged unity in defense of the nation's democracy. In the United States, University of California workers launched the largest academic strike in the country's history. The United Nations warns about the increase in civilian casualties as a result of violence attributed to irregular armed groups, after at least 613 people were killed in 2022 in Somalia. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Bolivia, President Luis Arce Catacora reaffirmed the value of unity to defeat coup actions and warned that social organizations will defend democracy on the streets. During a farmers' rally in the department of Chuquisaca on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the Single Federation of Workers of the indigenous peoples of that department, the Bolivian president denounced the right-wing's pretensions to lead the nation and return it to the times of the 2019 coup d'etat. Likewise, President Arce pointed out that the right wing uses the population and housing census as a pretext for these destabilizing actions. In this context, the head of state reiterated that his government remains united with the Bolivian people in their struggle to defeat any attack on democracy and institutionality. In addition, during an act, the Bolivian president reiterated that right-wing forces are once again seeking to destabilize his government and stressed that despite these destabilizing movements, he will continue working for the Bolivian people. President Arce also announced the enactment of Supreme Decree 4824, guaranteeing that the population and housing census is carried out on March 23, 2024, following the violent incidents that took place in the city of Santa Cruz, encouraged by the groups related to the region's governor. In Brazil, as part of the political transition process in the country, Vice President-elect Geraldo Alckmin announced the new names of the representatives who will join the transitional cabinet. On Twitter, the Vice President-elect announced 63 new representatives who will develop the necessary political management for the change of office. In turn, Alckmin detailed that the new members will advance policies in the areas of education, sports, youth, culture, cities infrastructure, and the subgroup focus on children. With this announcement, 14 of the 31 technical teams foreseen for the work of the transition team have been formally constituted. In Argentina, public health workers in the capital Buenos Aires demonstrated to demand a wage increase. Joined by neighborhoods and political organizations, thousands of residents and doctors marched with candles and flashlights to demand better wages and working conditions from the government of the city of Buenos Aires. Healthcare workers reached the third consecutive week of strikes across all the 30 public hospitals of the city. In a statement, Residents' Assembly claimed the struggle as historic and called on the chief of government of Buenos Aires, Horacio Rodríguez Larreta, to stop undermining public health care. And workers of the University of California launched the largest academic strike in the U.S. history. This Monday, 48,000 University of California academic workers went on strike. Workers picket all 10 University of California campuses statewide. For the past several months, workers organized in the United Auto Workers have been engaged in collective bargaining agreement negotiations with the University of California system. During these negotiations, workers proposed higher wages, more rights for working parents, and fully funded public transportation for workers, among other issues. According to the UC workers, their proposals have been ignored. The union also claims that the UC system broke the law by announcing and implementing implementing the changes outside the bargaining process and refusing to provide necessary information. Workers voted to authorize the strike, with 98% voting in favor. We stay in the U.S. Thousands of students walked out of the classes and gathered in front of Seattle City Hall on Monday, calling for better mental health support, more restrictions on gun access, and more training for security staff. The demonstration comes after a shooting at the Ingraham Heights last week that left one student dead. Seattle police estimated the crowd at City Hall at about 2,000. Later, between 700 and 900 protesters marched down city streets to continue the rally at Westlake. The demonstration was also joined by some parents demanding better gun control by the authorities. Some of the demands made were update nationwide safe storage laws for firearms, more de-escalation and anti-racism training for public school security guards, and a ban on assault rifles, demands that are repeated at the country level. We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news, updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Russian government assured that its exclusion from the G20 is impossible after the Ukrainian parliament showed its attempts to promote Moscow's expulsion from this organization. In statements to the press, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grashko pointed out that it is not possible to exclude his country from the Group of 20 and reiterated that these claims by Ukraine are political exercises, nothing more, and in this regard, he recalled that the G20 is much broader than the Western partners. This comes after the Ukrainian parliament called on the G20 member states to exclude the Russian Federation from the organization. And the Russian government also banned the entry of 100 Canadian citizens. This was announced by the country's foreign ministry in response to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's decision to sanction Russian leaders. The foreign ministry said that the list includes mainly high-ranking officials, businesspersons, activists of organizations, Ukrainian politicians, and collaborators of Nazi Germany during the Second World War, as well as representatives of the media and financial structures involved in the creation and promotion of anti-Russian policy. Chinese President Xi Jinping held a bilateral meeting on Tuesday with French President Emmanuel Macron on the sidelines of the G20 summit. During the meeting, the Chinese president called for the two countries to uphold the spirits of independence, autonomy, openness, and cooperation.
China is willing to cooperate with France to enhance communication and cooperation in order to jointly meet the global challenges of climate safety, energy safety, climate change, and so on, and to solve the conundrum of sustainable development.
Now we move on to other topics. On Gender Day at COP27, UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohamed said women and girls are essential, effective, and powerful leaders to address the climate crisis, but they remain largely undervalued and underestimated. The UN Deputy Chief reiterated that gender inequality and climate change pose grave threats to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, adding that it is particularly true for Africa. According to the WMO, water stress and hazards like weathering droughts and devastating floods are hitting African communities, economies, and ecosystems hard. High water stress is estimated to affect about 250 million people on the continent and displace up to 700 million individuals by 2030. Today, more than 1.2 million people affected by the drought are women and girls of reproductive age.
Women and girls are experiencing alarming levels of poverty and economic deprivation, increasing their vulnerability to gender-based violence. And UNDP projections indicate that about 90 million women in Africa could be food-starved by 2050.
There's a promise to double adaptation climate finance by 2025. That's extraordinarily important to women because they're doing so much on the ground to build communities. We're now talking about loss and damage. The loss and damage suffered by women and girls is disproportionately, terrible. So again, we need to have, yes, a mosaic of approaches, but we need a financial facility, hopefully at this COP, that the elders are very strongly calling for.
On Monday, the UN Environment Program Director, Inger Andersen, said she was worried when talking about the state of climate talks.
The sun is setting right now here in Sham, and we need to see much, much greater effort. Now, we know that ministers are coming back as we speak, and that's important. They need to give courage to their negotiators now and give instructions to their negotiators. Corner solutions will not do the job anymore. And we know that there's no IPCC scenario that takes us with the current setup to anything credible. So yes, I'm worried, concerned, but also absolutely determined that we have to push to get there.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. The United Nations warns about the increase in civilian casualties as a result of acts of violence attributed to irregular armed groups after registering at least 613 people killed in 2022 in Somalia. Through a communique, High Commissioner Volker Turk informed that these are the highest figures in the last 5 years, with acts of extreme violence blamed on the jihadist organization Al-Shabaab, tribal militias, and state security forces. In the document, the official states that at least 315 Somalis have been killed and 686 others injured as a result of explosive devices, most of them perpetrated by Al-Shabaab. The High Commissioner also urged the parties to ensure the protection of civilians and criticized the attacks of the jihadist organization against houses, wells, bridges, and schools with objectives that have nothing to do with the concept of war. The Sudanese government declared a state of emergency after more than 24 people were killed in a tribal conflict. The government's decision was declared on Sunday night as two warring tribal gangs fired live ammunition at the Reconciliation Commission that was sent to resolve the tensions. The clash began last week between the Miseria and Aulad Rashed Arab tribes in villages near Salinghay in the west of the country. Darfur continues to be periodically rocked by violence triggered by regional and territorial disputes and difficulties in accessing water, among other factors. Ethiopia's government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, have agreed to grant unfettered humanitarian access to Tigray starting on Tuesday. The Ethiopian government and the TPLF's latest commitment builds on a truce that both parties signed on November the 2nd, nearly 2 years into a disastrous war that killed about 500,000 people and displaced millions more. Under the agreement, Tigrayan forces have 30 days to completely disarm, with the Ethiopian government set to assume control of highways and airports, as well as preside over the Tigrayan capital of Mekelle. But after roughly 2 years of brutal fighting and reports of sexual violence and ethnic cleansing, experts said it might be challenging for Tigrayan fighters to accept such conditions. On Monday, hundreds of Congolese marched in support of the Congolese army through the streets of Goma on their way to the airport to fly to different training centers to fight against M23 rebels. According to the authorities, more than 3,000 men and women in North Kivu province were registered in the army in the last 10 days after President Felix Tshisekedi made a call earlier this month to join the armed forces. The young men were part of the first group of recruits leaving to receive training and are expected to return to the region where the military is fighting against the M23 group. The Iranian Foreign Ministry denounced France's failure to fulfill its responsibilities in the fight against terrorism and violence. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani condemned French President Emmanuel Macron's meeting with an opposition group in the Persian nation. In a statement, Kanani called it a flagrant violation of France's international commitments in the fight against terrorism. The spokesperson added that Macron's support for the protests is a cause for regret and shame and will remain etched in the memory of people who are well aware of the selective and anti-human rights policies of some European leaders. The Iranian diplomat also rejected the stance of German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, noting that Germany shirks its international responsibilities by not respecting the sovereignty of states. On Monday, Afghan Taliban leader Hibatullah Akhundzada ordered officials in the penal system to fully implement Islamic Sharia law. Hibatullah called for proper investigation in cases of robbery, kidnapping, and sedition, and in investigations that reach all the requirements of Sharia retribution. The magistrates are obliged to apply it. The supreme leader referred to the offenses considered by the Islamic law as the most serious ones, for which different penalties, including corporal punishment, are provided. The list includes adultery, false accusations that someone has committed this crime, but also alcohol consumption, theft, apostasy, and rebellion. On returning to power, the Taliban promised to be more flexible in the application of the Sharia, but quickly returned to very rigorous interpretation of Islam, which marked their first period in power between 1996 and 2001.
O deben quedarse en casa aunque reciban un salario.
And now we have a disclaimer to announce. Our Facebook page has been hacked and currently displaying content out of our agenda and against our social, moral, political, and informative premises. We stress TeleSUR English is not responsible for these posts that violate Facebook's community standards. We hope this company will give us back our credentials as soon as possible and resume our regular posts on that social media. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.